Hello there, welcome back to Jennie Designs with Paper and this week's episode of Crime and Coloring, where we take an alphabetical journey through the United States and revisit some of the earliest crimes. But before we talk crime, let's talk coloring. Last Tuesday in my card making video, I created 4 cards using 4 different card sketches from my favorite things and 1 pattern paper pack that I picked up from Hobby Lobby because I'm a sucker for new prints, and these were fabulous. Corals, mints, blacks, whites, gold foiling, gorgeous paper. And I am going to create the focal images for these cards today. I am using digital stamps again, and I have printed out 4 images to put on the front of my 4 cards. I will be coloring them with Copic markers in the same shades of coral and mint. So I'm taking a little bit of creative license with the greenery, using a mint color combination versus a traditional, more blue-green tropical color palette. But, they're my cards. I can do what I want to. Once I get all the images colored, I will go ahead and cut them out and put them on the cards. And I think that's all we need to talk about the coloring. So let's jump into the crime. Our journey today takes us to the state of Oklahoma. Oklahoma was the 46th state to enter the Union on November 16, 1907. Prior to statehood, however, Oklahoma was on the verge of becoming 2 separate states, the state of Oklahoma and the state of Sequoia. The area that is now called Oklahoma was part of the original land in the Louisiana Purchase. And the Georgia Compact of 1802 led to the rehoming, you can't see my air quotes here, but rehoming of native tribes to parts of Oklahoma in order for land programs conducted by the federal government to succeed. You know, where the government said, hey, move here, we'll give you 2 acres of land for free? Yeah, that kind of thing. Eventually, in 1902, the leaders of the Indian Territory sought to become their own state, to be named Sequoia. They held a convention consisting of representatives from the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and the Muskogee or Creek and Seminole tribes. These were considered the 5 main tribes of the indigenous peoples who were, again, air quote, rehomed to Oklahoma. They met again a year later to establish a constitution, and the Sequoia Constitutional Convention met in Muskogee on April 21, 1905. The convention drafted the Constitution, established an organizational plan for government, outlined proposed county designations in the new state, and elected delegates to go to the United States Congress to petition for statehood. They were serious. If this had actually happened, Sequoia would have been the first state to have a Native American majority population. Now, the convention's proposals were overwhelmingly endorsed by the residents of the Native American territory in a referendum election in 1905. The U.S. government, however, reacted coolly to the idea of an Indian territory and an Oklahoma territory becoming separate states. They preferred to have them share a singular state. William H. Murray was asked to represent the Chickasaw Nation during this Sequoia's attempt at statehood, but he predicted the plan would not succeed in Washington, D.C. So William suggested that if the attempt failed, the Indian Territory should work with the Oklahoma Territory to become one state. President Theodore Roosevelt and the Congress turned down the Indian Territory proposal, just as William had predicted. So, seeing the opportunity for statehood, William Murray and Charles Haskell, who was a representative from the Creek Nation, proposed another convention for the combined territories to be named Oklahoma. In 1906, the Oklahoma Enabling Act was passed by the U.S. Congress and approved by President Roosevelt. The act established several specific requirements for the proposed Constitution, using the Constitution from the Sequoia Convention as a basis, well, really the majority, of the new state constitution. Charles and William returned to Washington with the proposal for statehood. And on November 16, 1907, President Theodore Roosevelt signed the proclamation establishing Oklahoma as the nation's 46th state. Oklahoma is home to a lot of firsts. The first bread twist tie, the first shopping cart, the nation's first parking meter, the home of the first Girl Scout cookie sold. Boise City, Oklahoma was the only city in the United States to be bombed during World War II. Bet you didn't know that. A B-17 bomber based at the Dalhart Army Air Base in Texas dropped 6 practice bombs on the sleeping town, mistaking the city lights as target lights. Whoops. WKY, oh my goodness, I was trying to read that backwards, in Oklahoma City was the first radio station to transmit west of the Mississippi River. Sorry, words are hard. The nation's first tornado warning was issued March 25th in 1948 in Oklahoma City, minutes before a devastating tornado, and because of that warning, no lives were lost. Oklahoma has the largest Native American population of any state in the U.S. Oklahoma has produced more astronauts than any other state. Oklahoma has more man-made lakes than any other state. During the land rush, Oklahoma City and Guthrie went from vast open prairie cities to over 10,000 people in a single day. The nation's first yield sign was erected in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Aerosol can was invented in Oklahoma. And per square mile, Oklahoma has more tornadoes than any other place in the world. Ironically, the Will Rogers World Airport and the Wiley Post Airport are both named after 2 famous Oklahomans, both killed in the same airplane crash. And finally, Oklahoma is home of the Robin Hood bank robber. Charles Arthur Floyd was born on February 3, 1904, near Adairsville in Barstow County, Georgia. I know we're supposed to be in Oklahoma. We're getting there. He was the second son and 4th of the 6 surviving children born to Walter Lee and Mamie Helena Floyd. Descended from Georgia hill farmers, the Floyds traced their lineage through 3 centuries of Welsh settlers. So they had been in Georgia for a good long time. Fleeing the hills of the northwest Georgia in 1911 in search of new opportunities, the Floyds, with young Charlie in tow, joined family and friends in Sequoyah County in eastern Oklahoma near the Arkansas border. See, I told you we would get there. Charlie proved to be a bright boy, but was no stranger to mischief. Raised on small tenant farms near Sallisaw and Atkins, Charlie, as he was called by his family, worked long, arduous hours with his family in the fields of cotton and corn. He grew weary of the drudgery farm life and found solace in the many tales of heroic figures and outlaws from the region, especially Missouri bandit Jesse James. Charlie also learned of the art of making corn liquor or moonshine. By his early teens, he had earned the name Chalk, after his fondness for Choctaw beer, a popular homemade brew made of barley, hops, tobacco, fish berries, and a small amount of alcohol. Okay, fish berries, that sounds disgusting. I'm just saying, that just sounds gross. At the age of 16, after a few minor scrapes with the law, Charlie, then being called Chalk Floyd, took to the road as a hired hand on the wheat harvest circuit through through Oklahoma and Kansas. Soon tiring of the hard work, he became involved in bootlegging and some other illegal activities. In Wichita, Charlie found a mentor in the criminal named John Callahan, who was a shadowy figure that operated one of the largest fencing operations in the Midwest. So Charlie's not real great at picking buddies. Okay. He was arrested at the age of 18 after he stole $350 from a local post office. Now, adjusting that for inflation in 2023 would be about $6,200. Eventually, though, Charlie returned to his family and friends in Oklahoma, and in 1924, at the ripe old age of 20, he married Ruby Hardgrave, who was the daughter of another of the tenant farmers. And later that year, Ruby gave birth to a son named Jack Dempsey Floyd, named after the world champion boxer. However devoted Charlie was to his wife and his son, he was restless with life as a dirt farmer. So Charlie traded 5 gallons of corn whiskey for a pearl-handled pistol and set off for things unknown. Charlie was not very good at staying out of trouble. Okay, and I'll get to a whole list of things he did that was not so good at staying out of trouble. But on January 4th, 1929, Ruby filed for divorce. Wow, sorry, words are hard. And claimed that her incarcerated husband had neglected the family. Charlie did not contest that action. She took custody of their then 4-year-old son, and he was serving a 5-year prison sentence at the time, and he served 3.5 years before he was granted parole. Now, there was one source that said even though they were divorced over the years, Charlie would spend time with his ex-wife and child, and sometimes even living with them. So it doesn't seem like there were any hard feelings between the two. He just was lousy at staying at home and taking care of his family. Once he had been granted parole in 1925, Charlie and a friend jumped a freight train and headed east and left behind the Cookson Hills of Oklahoma, as they were called. And in St. Louis, in September of that year, he took part of a payroll robbery that netted a total or a little over $11,000, well, nearly $12,000. And that landed him another 5-year sentence in the Missouri State Penitentiary in Jefferson City. In fact, that's the prison sentence he was serving when his wife filed for divorce, I think. Following his release from prison in Missouri, Charlie headed straight to Kansas City, ready to put to use the education in crime he had received from the veteran convicts behind bars. So, he decided he was going to put all that new knowledge to use. Almost immediately after leaving prison, Charlie, usually accompanied by 1 or 2 accomplices, carried out a string of more than 30 successful bank robberies across the Midwest, primarily in Ohio and Oklahoma. Authorities also implicated him in several murders resulting from gun battles with law enforcement officers or rival criminals. And it was during this period that he acquired the nickname Pretty Boy, although accounts of how this came to be differ. In one account, Orville Drake gave him the name because he would wear a white button-up dress shirt and slacks to work in the oil fields. And so the men began calling him Pretty Boy. And later that became Pretty Boy Floyd. Another count was that the payroll master that he robbed in 1925 described one of the robbers as a pretty boy with apple cheeks. Another theory was that during a card game at Mother Ash's boarding house in Kansas City, Charlie met his future girlfriend, a woman named Beulah Baird, who gave him the colorful moniker Pretty Boy. However the nickname came to be, it was reported that Charlie despised it. He did not care for being called a pretty boy, although I have pictures and he wasn't ugly. Just saying. By 1929, Charlie was wanted in numerous cases. On March 9th, he was arrested in Kansas City and was under investigation for murder, I believe, and again on May 7th for vagrancy and suspicion of highway robbery, but then he was released the next day. 2 days later, he was arrested in Pueblo, Colorado and charged with vagrancy. He was fined $50 and sentenced to 60 days in jail. He was arrested in Akron, Ohio on March 8th of 1930 under the alias Frank Mitchell and was charged with the murder of an Akron police officer who had been killed during a robbery that evening. He was arrested in Toledo, Ohio on May 20th. He was convicted of a Sylvania, Ohio bank robbery and sentenced on November 24th of 1930 to 12 to 15 years in the Ohio State Penitentiary, but he escaped. And Charlie was a suspect in the death of the Kansas City brothers Wally and Ball Ash, who were rum runners that were found dead in a burning car. So he and his fellow criminals reportedly killed patrolman R.H. Castor of Bowling Green, Ohio. Charlie was also accused of killing a federal agent, Curtis C. Burke, in Kansas City, Missouri. And 3 members of his, quote, gang attempted to rob the Farm and Merchants Bank in Boley, Oklahoma. And despite his life of crime, Charlie was viewed very positively by the general public because when he robbed banks, he allegedly destroyed mortgage documents, relieving people of their debt to the bank. So he was very often protected by the locals of Oklahoma, and they referred to him as Robin Hood of the Cookson Hills. It later became known that Charlie did not commit many of the crimes attributed to him. On April 9th of 1932, Charlie shot and killed Irv Kelly, an Oklahoma lawman turned bounty hunter, during a foiled attempt to ambush him near Bixby, Oklahoma. One of Charlie's most illustrious bank jobs occurred later that year in his hometown when he and his partner George robbed the Sallisaw State Bank in broad daylight while friends and family watched. He had a cheering section. Charlie's whirlwind bandit career began to unravel on June 17, 1933, when he and Adam Richetti became chief suspects in the infamous, Kansas City Massacre. The Kansas City Massacre was a gunfight attack by Vernon Miller and accomplices on lawmen escorting robber Frank Jelly Nash to a car parked at Union Station in Kansas City, Missouri. Kansas City detectives William Grooms and Frank Hermanson, Oklahoma Police Chief Otto Reed, and Special Agent Ray Caffrey were killed. Nash was also killed while sitting in the car, shot in the head by his would-be rescuers. 2 other Kansas City police officers survived by slumping forward in the back seat and pretending to be dead. As the gunman inspected the car, another officer responded from the station and fired at them, forcing them to flee. Vernon Miller was found dead on November 27, 1933, outside Detroit, Michigan, having been beaten and strangled. Now, Charlie and Adam were allegedly Vernon's accomplices. Factors weighing against them included their apparent presence in Kansas City at the time. Eyewitnesses identified Adam. Also, Adam's fingerprints were recovered from a beer bottle. The underworld account named Charlie and Adam as the gunmen in Kansas City. And Hoover's firm, a.k.a. the FBI, totally said they were guilty. Although at this time it was called the FOI, or BOI, Bureau of Investigation. Okay. Charlie and Adam were named by the BOI as the gunmen, and fellow bank robber Alvin Karpus claimed that Charlie confessed his involvement. On the other side of the issue, though, the bandit alleged to have been Charlie was supposed to have been wounded by a gunshot to the shoulder in this attack, and Charlie's body had no signs of a gun injury or gunshot injury when examined after the Kansas City Massacre. The underworld, the underworld account identifying Charlie and Adam as the killers was offset by equally unreliable underworld accounts proclaiming their innocence. The Floyd family has maintained that Charlie admitted to many crimes, but never completely and totally denied involvement in the Kansas City Massacre, as did Adam. In fact, on June 30th, 1933, Kansas City police received a postcard from Springfield, Missouri, which read, "Dear Sirs, I, Charles Floyd, want it made known that I did not participate in the massacre of officers at Kansas City. Charles Floyd. The police department believed the note to be genuine, and he also reportedly denied any involvement in the massacre to the agents who had fatally wounded him. So we're getting to that part. The BOI named Charles Floyd public enemy number 1 in July of 1934 after the death of John Dillinger. On October 18th of 1934, Charlie and Adam were in Buffalo they were leaving Buffalo, New York, and their vehicle slid off the road into a telephone pole in heavy fog. Nobody was injured, but the car was disabled, so they sent their 2 female companions back to town to get a tow truck. They planned to have the women accompany the tow truck driver and the vehicle into town, wait for the car to be repaired, and then come back and fetch them off the roadside. Like, they didn't want to go into town. Sometime after dawn on the 19th, a motorist named Joe Fryman and his son-in-law passed by and saw 2 men dressed in suits lying by the side of the road because they were waiting for the ladies to come back with the car, right? Joe and his son-in-law thought it was suspicious and called the Wellsville, Ohio police. So the police chief was a man named John Fultz. So John investigated. He brought with him Officer Potts and Officer Irwin. Adam saw the lawman coming and took off running into the woods, and 2 of the officers chased him. Chief Fultz headed toward Charlie. Charlie immediately drew his gun and fired, and he and the chief engaged in a gunfight, during which the chief was wounded in the foot and Officer Potts was wounded in the right shoulder, and then Charlie fled into the forest. After enlisting the help of another local police officer, a man named Chester Smith, Chester Smith had been a sniper in World War I, the group of lawmen resumed the chase and successfully apprehended Adam, but Charlie remained on the run. News of this search quickly spread. The local police in the surrounding areas were mobilized, and a team from the BOI, Bureau of Investigation, was quickly dispatched. On October 22nd, Charlie was able to hitch a ride to an East Liverpool, Ohio neighborhood where he was able to obtain food at a pool hall owned by a friend of his, a man named Charles Joy. 3 separate divergent accounts exist as to the following events. One given by the group of BOI agents, one given by a group of local law enforcement officers, and another account provided by civilians or witnesses in the area. All 3 people agree that Charlie was confronted by a group of lawmen soon after leaving the pool hall, and upon realizing that he had been spotted, he attempted to run away, but was shot down by the pursuing officers, then arrested. It is also agreed that Charlie was formally placed in federal custody and initially survived, even though he had been shot during that foot chase. So according to the BOI, which in 1935 became known as the FBI, their agents alone participated in the final confrontation. They claimed that local law enforcement officers only arrived after the final confrontation. According to accounts, 4 agents named Samuel McKee Jr., David Hall, Winfred Hopton were led by a man named Purvis. I can't remember his first name, sorry. And they had with them 4 members of the East Liverpool Police Department. And they were searching the area of South Clarkston, Ohio in 2 different cars. So according to the FBI, they spotted a car move from behind a corn crib and then back up. Charlie reportedly then emerged from the car and drew a pistol, and the BOI or FBI agents opened fire, and Charlie reportedly said, "I'm done for, you've hit me twice." However, news reports from the newspaper states that Charlie crawled out of the corn crib toward an automobile and then ran in the direction of a wooded ridge, where Purvis yelled, "Halt!" Charlie kept running. Purvis called out fire, and Charlie was mortally wounded by 4 bullets. Then handcuffs were placed on his wrists. Reportedly, Charlie asked, "Who the hell tipped you?" Charlie refused to answer any questions from Purvis, and especially about the Kansas City massacre, but did say, "I am Floyd. Where's Eddie?" referring to Adam Rachetti. His nickname was Eddie. Thinking he had been shot twice, he remarked, "You got me twice." So Purvis did not disclose Charlie's last words. Allegedly, 4 days before, Charlie and two accomplices had robbed a bank of $500. Charlie's share of his last bank robbery was like $120. And among the effects found on him was a watch and a fob, and each had 10 notches, allegedly for the 10 persons Charlie was attributed to killing. East Liverpool police captain Chester Smith, after his retirement, described the events differently in a 1979 issue of Time magazine. He was credited with shooting Charlie first and stated that he had deliberately wounded but not killed him. Quote, "I knew Purvis couldn't hit him, so I dropped him with 2 shots from my .32 Winchester rifle." According to Smith's account, Charlie fell and did not regain his footing, and Smith then disarmed him. And at that point, Purvis ran up and ordered, "Back away from that man, I want to talk to him." Purvis questioned him briefly and received swear words in reply. So then he ordered other agents to fire at Charlie. Hollis claims that Charlie was shot at point-blank range with a back that up. Smith claims that Agent Hollis shot Charlie at point-blank range with a submachine gun, killing him. The interviewer for Time magazine asked if there was a cover-up by the FBI, and Smith responded, "Sure was, because they didn't want it to get out that he had been killed that way." An FBI agent disputed Smith's claim in a letter to the editors of Time. He said that he was one of the 4 agents present and that Charlie was killed on a farm several miles away from East Liverpool. But FBI records do not have Agent Hopton listed on the incident report. Charlie's body was embalmed and briefly viewed at the Sturgis Funeral Home in East Liverpool, Ohio, before being sent back to Oklahoma. His body was placed on public display in Sallisaw, Oklahoma, and his funeral was attended by between 20 and 40,000 people and remains the largest funeral in Oklahoma history. He was buried in Athens, Oklahoma. And just to keep it interesting, a 2002 book on the Kansas City massacre titled The Encyclopedia of Kidnappings attributes at least some of the killings to friendly fire by a lawman who was unfamiliar with his weapon, and that is based on ballistics tests. Oddly, there are more than one popular portrayals of Pretty Boy Floyd. Woody Guthrie wrote a protest song romanticizing Charlie's life in 1939 called Pretty Boy Floyd, which recounted his supposed generosity to the poor and compared foreclosing bankers to outlaws, calling both actions robbery. Guthrie's song has subsequently been covered by many recording artists. And Dick Tracy's adversary, oh my heaven's sakes, Flat Top Jones, was based on Pretty Boy Floyd, reportedly. In that cartoon, Flat Top claims to be a freelancer from the Crookstone Hills, a parody of Cookstone Hills in Oklahoma, and the comic strip refers to Flat Top's involvement in the Kansas City massacre. So all of the cards are complete and put together, and I still think the pineapple one might be my favorite. But I do have pictures, y'all. And I have a palm tree left over. This is Charlie Pretty Boy Floyd. See, he's not an ugly man. I can see why he got the nickname. This is one of 2 wanted posters I found for him. It has a photograph and a description as well as what he is wanted for. Here is a photo collage. I'm not sure who put this together, but it does have one of his arrest numbers. And this is a picture of his wife. So, interesting story. Who would have thought that Oklahoma could have been home to a not necessarily modern day Robin Hood, but a very American version of Robin Hood? He wasn't exactly robbing from the government, but he was definitely robbing from the rich and allegedly giving to the poor. So I don't know. I thought it was an interesting story because most of the crimes were, or at least the biggest crime that was attributed to him, was discounted later due to ballistics and his own confessions. Well, thanks so much for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed this story. I do have a couple of other videos here I think you might like. I've also added a subscribe button. If you have not yet subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you did. Leave me a thumbs up, tell YouTube you liked the video, and have a really fabulous day.